and welcome to this episode of the Level Design Podcast. I'm Mark Drew, and shall be guiding you through the world of level design with a very special guest, Arran Langmead.
Hello.
Welcome. Arran, you have a beautiful long title that
It's gorgeous.
is awesome, isn't it? It's Developer Relations Technical Artist at Epic,
That's
working
it.
on Unreal Engine for Enterprise, or something like that, isn't it?
So I work purely on games.
Okay, okay.
Because there's kind of a split between games and enterprise.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of like my main focus.
Right. But previously you've done a lot. So you've been you're the director of Strangely Named Studio. No, it's literally called Strangely Named Studio. It's not a Strangely Named Studio.
It's strangely named.
It's strangely named.
Yeah.
The Bears Can't Drift, which is a lie because I saw them drifting quite well.
It's allegedly. You'd have to buy the game to find out.
Yeah, exactly. Which is available now on Steam, right?
And PlayStation 4. Yeah,
Excellent. And as well as that, you were a lecturer at Solent University, which is down in Southampton.
Yeah, I was doing a talk on procedural mesh generation in Unreal Engine, which I think you were in the audience for.
Yeah, I think it was in the front row, checking out
heckling like normal. So at the time I was lecturing at the university, and then there were some people from Epic in the audience, and they came up afterwards and they were like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?"
Well, that's a tough question.
And I was like, I don't know. Where do you see me in 5 years?
Yeah. And they replied, and time moves forward, and now you're actually working at Epic. That's
I
awesome.
know, this time next year, it's really surreal coming back here. And
but you talked both years, right?
I did, yeah. So, but before it was kind of like I do the talk, and then I can chill out and relax for the rest of the time, and kind of barbecue on the beach with mates and stuff, and no one cares that I'm from Strangely Named or Solent University, and now this time around I'm coming in and kind of. It's
representing
this is the job now, kind of, or part of the job is coming in and talking to people and things like that.
And you're on the clock
I'm on the clock. So,
Well, until like for another half hour or something of this episode, and then you're like off the clock and partying, right?
Yeah, well, God no. The you're on the clock, basically for dinner as well, because you gotta do the whole. Taking people out for dinner, which is a terrible job.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing.
From the procedural generation stuff, I love your fetish for trees, which you presented on Unreal Meetup, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I really like that. But it seems like you've covered end to end of the production process and been teaching it for a while now.
So the course was computer games art, and while there wasn't a focus on design, obviously design plays a part of it, because you have to think about basically everything. If you're building a character, you're building a narrative. You're building a story on that character. It needs to be able to, accurately represent what that character is. Just my massive breasts don't work on so many characters because it's like, what's the narrative on that?
Yeah.
And then the same with environments as well.
Right.
You can't just create an environment. You have to create a story, and you have to create a path, and you have to create kind of like a flow for that environment.
Having talked to students that have come from your course, the fact that you probably taught, I'm not going to name them on the podcast, but that came across quite well. In fact, so they did learn something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't just complaints.
No, not at all. It was a lot of the work comes up is, okay, so we need to do a mechanic, and they'll come up with a mechanic, and they actually say, okay, well, so this screen looks like this because a whole background story,
Yeah, I mean, so much of the teaching side of things tends to be just making sure that they've actually thought about why they're doing a particular thing. You get one person come up, like as an example, who they go, I'm going to do a gun for one of my portfolio pieces, and you go, okay, and then they go, I'm going to do it as a Hello Kitty gun, and then you go, okay.
Yeah, it's gonna look cool.
Why? And they go, I think it'll be cool. And you're like, okay, is that it?
Yeah.
Like, is that as far as the thought process goes?
I have seen a Hello Kitty rifles in the US, by the way, big rifles.
And again, there's potential for a huge amount of, people don't like politics in games, I guess, but there's a huge amount of potential for politics in, kind of
a Hello Kitty gun, right?
And what does it mean to have a Hello Kitty gun?
Even just from that point, you can go on and say, actually, it's that guns are so prevalent, for example, oh god, we're getting into politics. No, we're just making up a world here that, you know, they're advertised to kids. They're like, you know, McDonald's toys that, you know, killing is not seen as something bad. You know, you can go down a really rabbit hole there, and you can design the characters. I can start seeing the kids carrying these guns because we start training them to go to war from very young. But
it didn't. But the thing is that it didn't matter that person had stumbled across something potentially interesting.
Yeah.
The fact that they hadn't identified that and thought about that was the thought process that you really have to get into. It's like getting out of that, I'm doing it because I think it's cool, and saying, no, I've got a justification for that. And you have a justification for literally everything that is in the scene, to the point where it just infuriates the students to no end, because you're going, why have you done that like that? And a lot of stuff on the art side is you can do a good drawing by accident, but you need to have like cognition and understanding and intent and all of that stuff in order to be a good artist, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and there we go. That's politics 101 for you. You're right. It's something that happens like when I'm designing levels, for example. It's like I'm going, well, why would you put... I'm well known for complaining about corridors, but...
You are.
And that's one of the things I'm going, it's like, why is we're recording here and there's a corridor outside? So obviously I'm not upset, but there are rooms on the other side of that. If you were to get a hacksaw and cut a random hole, you're not going to just find empty air on the other side. You're going to probably find someone showering and screaming at you for...
Yeah, they're going to be really upset.
They're going to be really upset if you come into the wall.
Could you stop doing that, by the way? I am trying to... I'm next door and it's...
It's really bothering me.
Yeah, it's really getting on my nerves now.
The chainsaw through the wall. No, but the whole point of being like, think one step beyond. I realise that from a level design or from creating this, you're just making this long corridor, but why is that like that?
And there's so much that you can put into that as well, you know, kind of like if the doors are really closely spaced together, you know that the rooms are probably going to be very small.
Yeah.
And at that point, what does that indicate? The quality of the hotel that you're in, which gives you an idea of the kind of, you know, kind of textures you need to be making and the materials and the kind of the age. And there's so much that the player will never, you know, kind of consciously pick up on. Any of those things where it pulls you out when you have something that doesn't fit.
Yeah, even if it's in a sci-fi thing, they go, well, it's sci-fi, it's made up, right? And you're like, well, yeah, but no. Even, for example, we were talking earlier in a previous episode about Prey. And, you know, so there's good and bad level design in that, but, well, actually, there's a lot of very good level design in that, but everything feels right, even though it's like weird angles. Does that make sense? Everything feels the right scale for what it is. And that's the things that you have to ask the students to think about, right?
I always show them, there's this video on YouTube from this guy who basically talks about the design of chairs in film. And it's just one of the best design videos I've ever seen. Starts off with, he does a lot on Jodie Foster and films that Jodie Foster's in.
Is this because of the angles and the heights of the chairs, or was that it?
No, it's the kind of the symbolism behind the chair. So he starts off with Silence of the Lambs, classic.
Remember the chair? Well, the chair that she's sitting outside his
that exact one, right? And he breaks down, and maybe he goes in a bit further than what the, you know, kind of designers and directors might have even had in mind, but he breaks down the kind of the symbolism and the parity between the Jodie Foster as a character and where it puts her in the environment, and the actual chair itself, you know, kind of the fact that she has to sit down on this chair and Anthony Hopkins is standing above her, which immediately puts you in kind of like a student teacher, you know, kind of paradigm, or, you know, kind of giving people, you know, kind of power, you know, kind of looming over and all of those kinds of things. But then also the chair itself being this kind of like bit kind of rickety, it's like unstable, it's not like a, you know, kind of big CEO, you know,
it's not like a big sofa or something.
It's not like a chaise longue that she kind of just you know, kind of lies on and to have a chat with this serial killer. It's, you know, like this, you know, kind of proper rickety one, and then you can see afterwards they've kind of almost tie the chair to Jodie Foster, where the kind of she leaves at the end of the scene and she walks away and she kind of stumbles a little bit as she's walking.
Like
it's a bit weird, like she's not stable. And then he goes into that, and then he gives some examples of bad design.
Going back to level design or to environment design is one of the things that can tell a huge amount just by a chair, right? And in films, it's kind of funny because it's like, I bet you, if you went and talked to the director, say, "Oh no, we just pulled that chair because we needed a chair, and that was one that was around."
Yeah.
But inversely, I bet you if they brought a big sofa and they put it in front, you go, no.
Yeah, we're not having that. That's
Not having
ridiculous.
that. That's stupid, right?
Yeah.
Or if you put a big armchair and they put it in front, he'll go, no. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
So even if it might be something found that I bet you the crew would have said, "Oh yeah, we just found a chair." It'd be like, but it was right for the scene. You would have known.
But you get this with artists who are starting out all the time. You know, they undervalue the small things that kind of seem incidental and unimportant. And actually, you know, there's portfolio pieces on ArtStation that are just a thing, right? That almost every artist has done because at some point, because they need to, you know, they just need it right for the environment that they're doing. And then you have someone come along and they just absolutely transcend
there's
what it was,
one
even
designer,
if it's a barrel.
There's and then you go like, that's told me that these things are handcrafted. There's no machinery or things like that, right? I think there's a character artist. I mean, characters are slightly different because they do kind of tell a story, but equally in that sense, he designed a lot of the Dishonored characters. He did the drawings for the characters and did a lot of the concept art for the characters in one of the Love, Sex and Robots Netflix series, right?
That was good.
It's Peter Chevigny, I think. But with that, his characters not only tell you about the world they live in because of how they're dressed, but it tells you like what's gone on with the lives of these people. And you know, just even because of his art style, they look all weathered. They look like they live near the sea, you know, they've been out.
How much better is that than a bit of pop-up text that says,
I've been in the sea.
I've been in the sea.
Yeah, for years.
Right, if it's something that you just sit in the world and you're just like, I'm just picking up on all these cues because we do it all the time in the real world.
Right.
Right, we pick up on all of this stuff, whether it's, you know, kind of offensive or inoffensive, like you absorb information around you and build up a picture in your head of where you are and what's going on.
And things that are wrong in that will stand out really quickly.
I mean, there's a reason why if you walk down like a dodgy alleyway, I'm using finger quotes here, that you immediately get the feeling that you're in a dodgy alleyway.
Right.
Right. You're not walking down that alleyway thinking da 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 da. You know,
flowers and rainbows.
Yeah, you've picked up on a load of stuff that indicates to you that this is a dangerous or you know, somewhere that you don't want to be.
Including a lot of stuff that I was actually doing in a talk in the alleyways, which is that
the corridors of the outside world.
Yeah, the corridors of the outside world. Well, it was about tropes, but anyway, one of the things was that as part of level design, if you imagine going down an alleyway and you see have a cut off to the left, but you can't really tell that there's a cut off to the left. You know, someone could be hiding behind there, or there could be another alleyway or things like that. That can be unnerving. You know, and that if you're designing a level, you should like then play it backwards to see from which angle do you see various routes, right? So in alleyways, there's always hidden danger because there's bins, there is things can hide, monsters can hide behind, right? I mean, I don't know. I walked down an alleyway here in Brighton and it looked all right, but
I don't know. There's there's the alleyways.
But now, as working for Epic, that's obviously giving you a massive insight into.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely has, especially with my role where I'm going to a lot of studios and talking to them about the issues that they're facing and you know, kind of what they're even working on and doing. You learn a lot very quickly because you're just surrounded by geniuses, you know, like these really intelligent people across, you know, a massive span of the industry. So yeah, you get to see it all.
I mean, I know I can't ask any specifics because obviously that is the old NDA thing that.
The old NDA, yeah.
Yeah. Do you see a certain pattern of people encountering the same problems, or? Yeah,
I mean, I always look at things from, you know, kind of from the more tech art point of view. But I think the problem, and I kind of raised this one on last year on my procedural mesh talk, is that the problem for all artists is iteration. If you can iterate quickly, you can produce art, kind of that's better, quicker. And a lot of the time, kind of in dev tools, there's a lot of bottlenecks or a lot of points of no return where you're working on something. So take our open world tools at the moment, right? We've got world composition, which allows you to lay out, kind of like a grid of streamed components. Now, one of the big questions that I get asked a lot is how big should they be, right? Because you can set them to be any size. They could be 4 kilometers squared, they could be 1 kilometer squared, they could be a couple of 100 meters. And actually the question is more about, well, how much data is in each component that needs to be streamed in, because that's where you start getting hitches. Kind of like with most things in the games world, you're constantly battling between 2 different points, right? Kind of like if it's everything, like with UV mapping, right? Kind of you're battling on one point, you're trying to give everything enough space so that you're not getting any bleed and that everything's kind of visible and kind of packed in a way that makes sense. But on the other hand, you're also trying to pack everything as tightly as you can together to maximize the amount of UV space and texture space you're getting. So on that side of things, you look at doing a big open world, you need to use world composition. You don't know how big each component is going to be, kind of when you start. You can do some tests and you can get a rough idea, and that's what we always recommend, is to try and get a rough approximation of how much data is going to be in each chunk.
Right, and you wouldn't know that until you've done a few more tests about how much stuff you want to have in there.
Absolutely,
For example, that in a big open world thing, how much stuff is between the points of interest, right? Because it might be just, there's either grass cards or however you implement grass there, right?
But we've got some tools that mean that you can iterate on the size of those components very, very quickly and very easily.
Okay.
So up to a point. So we have, obviously, world composition is loading in generally a height map, and then you'll have a smart material, smart shader will break up sand, grass, dirt, rocks, whatever, based on that material and some masks that you can also bring in.
Right.
And then the material inside Unreal is really cool because you can actually say, on these masks, I want these meshes to be scattered. Right? So you can say, okay, where I'm using my grass textures, I want you to actually put grass meshes where those are. Right? And that's really nice and easy because you can update those textures and you can update the terrain, and that all just gets procedurally updated as you go. So you can go back and you can make all the changes you want. You can change the chunks and the sizes, and because all of that stuff is derived from the material that you've made, it all just gets updated and then it's all there, right? And that's all great. And you can do similar things with, kind of like tree style meshes, so larger scale meshes. It never has to be foliage, but it often ends up being foliage. And you can create volumes that are representative of, say, I want to place these kinds of trees here and these kinds of rocks here at this density with these particular parameters, right? And those are really easy as well because you can just update them like that. So you can create a secondary streaming layer that's always streamed in, that's basically all these volumes, and they're independent from the landscape, but they also are feeding into it. So you can change it and you can update it and it's all fine and it all kind of reads. But then you start placing assets down manually, right? That's when you start getting into problems, and you kind of reach a cut-off at that point, because where do you place those actors in the world? Do you place them into another streamed volume, or do you place them into the one that's got the landscape in it? And at that point, if you actually say, oh shit, no, it can't be 1k kilometer, it has to be 500 meters or whatever instead, suddenly you've now got 4 levels where you had 1, and then you have to go back and you have to manually kind of push all of those assets that you've manually placed, into the right volumes and the right areas so that they're streamed in correctly and they are included with the LOD generation. So that kind of stuff is tricky, and actually what we need and what we want to move to is where that kind of stuff becomes almost irrelevant, where you can update that stuff retroactively and it all just
rebuilds and
it all works. And this is why Houdini is so is becoming
Yeah.
so powerful, because actually you can kind of figure this stuff out and you can iterate and go, oh, actually no, the road shouldn't be here, it should be over here instead, and you can just move it, and then everything else is just updates and fixes.
I mean, Houdini is just like a big box of magic to me, because of like the stuff that how you can do it, and it's like, oh well, if you click here, this was a box once, but down here this is a whole city, like not just a block, but a whole city with cars and people in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's all procedural. Now if I change it to squares, now a different shape of city, and you're like, okay.
There's a really good, I think it's a GDC talk on Far Cry, where
Right.
they talk about how they made their, God knows, it was like 32 kilometer square play space, or 64 or something. It was absolutely huge, and they talked about the tools that they use for Houdini, and players are demanding or need or want, don't know whether they actually want it, but they say they want bigger and bigger play spaces, and that is becoming more and more unmanageable for artists to go through and do,
And just generate,
right?
I mean,
and just actually go through and decorate.
I mean,
and do all of
if you
those
just start
things.
thinking about it, it's like, you have to get an army of people to scour the land generating it.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't, because this is where Houdini comes in.
Well, exactly. So this is why we need these tools to put down a base, so we can do these kind of broad strokes, get the kind of the design right and the feel right, and then we can kind of generate the stuff around it, and we can tweak and iterate and develop, and nothing's blocking that, and we're never reaching. Ideally, what you want is to go from, if you're building worlds of this scale, it's obviously different if you're doing a different type of game. But if you're building this kind of scale, you want to go from the start of your game's development almost to the game has shipped, and you could still go back in and change this base stuff, and it would all still update and work.
Yeah.
And that can still become unmanageable and unrealistic. But
Right, because
I think we're moving towards that.
A similar talk was the one, I think, by Ubisoft on Wildlands Ghost Recon.
It's the same talk.
Is it the same
I think
talk?
it's the same talk. Yeah, I think that's
Because it
it's
was
Ghost Recon, not Far Cry.
I come from Bolivia, so they are talking about Bolivia, and I was like, yeah, you've gotten a lot of. I mean, obviously the geography is nothing like Bolivia, but the environment is, and they've got loads of areas that are places I recognise, and then you start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to overlay a road on this, and you're like, right, but now if the mountain changes, you have to rebuild that road, right?
Yeah.
So from a macro level, you can just go, well, actually, we have to move this mountain over here because it makes no sense. And what do you do with the roads? Right, guys, everyone come back in and rebuild the road, but it just rebuild.
And this works at the indie level as well, and actually it works really well because they can use the same tools because everything is so freely available nowadays that
Houdini is the first one that I saw that had an apprentice license. So if you want to learn it, just have an apprentice license.
Yeah, I think most software is kind of moving towards that model because they're realizing the value of it. That actually you just want people using the tech, and the monetization comes, from the commercial use cases of it, not necessarily the learning.
Yeah.
Of it.
And it had like an indie studio, and then it has other ones. But I was quite surprised because for me, this is what the VFX artists in Hollywood use, right? This is not. I mean, it does a lot of stuff, but it's like literally that secret software they use behind the scenes. But but then again, so was Unreal Engine, right? Until a few years back when it went. It's kind of open source, but it's.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
open source, isn't it?
it's open source. It's open source now. Like you can go on Git and you can download it,
yeah.
and it's all good to go. But I mean, we're seeing this across multiple industries as well. Because I mean, Pixar's
RenderMan.
one that they just like. Here you go. You can just use that.
It's kind of different. I mean, for companies like Epic who make games, they are getting a lot of money from games. They're using the tools, and what they're doing is what a lot of other. I mean, I'm talking industries, not just film, but also web industries. You go like, okay, we built these libraries or these tools because we're building this other thing and we needed them. Now that we will give that to other people because other people might need them, right? But it does make other companies that make tools, and that's all they do, life a little bit harder because their monetization model has to be slightly different. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff I think is just the progression of time. Stuff's moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying one's bad or one's other.
No,
I'm for both, but I think it's great what Epic have done with Unreal Engine, and one of the reasons I use it is because I came into it and it felt like a battle-hardened bit of software. That makes sense. It says there was a lot of choices in there. There was like, no, we had to use this to deliver product.
Yeah.
And we put this in here because we needed to do this job and we needed this other person to do that job, and these two things had to work together. It wasn't different workflows, it was the same workflow.
Yeah, I mean, it gets updated so regularly as well. I mean, when I was doing development for Bears, I would have a problem, like I think really old versions of the engine, because I was starting off when it was quite newly out, so it was on like 4.4 or something like that. And you could add local players using a blueprint node. So there was an add player blueprint node, but there was no remove player blueprint node.
Oh, oops.
So you had to run a console command, which you could run as a blueprint. There's a blueprint console command node, and you could do a remove player doing that.
Right.
But obviously that wouldn't work in the shipped version of the game, because all of the debug command stuff doesn't work. So so the Steam version of the game initially, and it might still be, shipped in development mode, which means that you still have access to the thing. And actually, it was fine, because I even posted it on the main Steam page for Bears, is that, hey, actually, if you want to do, here's some debug console commands that you can run if you're interested in looking at it in wireframe mode and
cool.
and all of this stuff. So you could actually, like, it was really cool, because people could, kind of hack it a little bit and kind of run little commands if they wanted to fly around the map or something like that.
Cool.
And it was like, I mean, it's a little game. It didn't matter.
We talked about it in a previous episode about glitching through stuff, like people doing speed runs and stuff through games. And of course, like with Bears, you can totally do it, right?
Yeah,
collision.
Absolutely. Yeah, you do what you like. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is that actually we had few little bits like that where, and not even to that level. Some of the stuff was just really minor. Like the murder mystery game I was working on at the time was really heavily reliant on databases and data tables, but in Blueprint, you specify which data table you want to use, and then that's it. You couldn't use another one, which means that all of the murders, if we did them, would all have to be in a single data table, or we'd have to do a load of extra blueprint work for each individual one, rather than just say, hey, for this murder, just use this data table, which would have been much better. But the thing is that, like, by the time it becomes an issue, a lot of the time, Epic had already fixed it. Like, by the time we came to the getting a bit closer to the PlayStation release for Bears, they'd already added the remove player node back in, and the same with the data table stuff. Is like, you know, upgrade to the next version. Hey, it's there. Like, because they're so reactive and they're, kind of all the developers, I used to chat to James Golding before I joined Epic, just because he comes to, kind of develop in events like that, because he loves seeing the community and talking to the community. And I just have a little, bitch to him about a particular node that I really wanted in Blueprint that wasn't in there. And then, hey presto, suddenly some of that stuff's there. It's like,
I don't know if this was added. I went on about a year or two back, I went on this like tirade, this thread, I think is the proper word. When you get angry on Twitter, you create a thread, right?
Do you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that, not just a barrage of tweets, but yes, you make a full thread of, 1 of 50 or whatever you're doing, about things that I thought were wrong with Unreal Engine that were just bugging me. It was like, one of them was that you see a light cone for a spotlight, but I can't see a camera one. Right, the camera is just beautifully rendered camera, but I can't see where the field of vision of it was. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. And then recently I didn't go through the whole thing, but I went, wait a minute, was I just a noob? Because I went through all the different threads and went, oh, actually, there's a setting. I mean, it's not well found, but you can find it here and you can find it here. Not like half the things I was complaining about were there. Now, I don't know if it's because they fixed it or because I found out more about it. But but it's true.
It could be either way.
So I'm gonna say they fixed it.
Yeah, they were listening to you
personally.
Tim Sweeney came in. He was like, "I've just seen a tweet, a thread, not just a tweet, a thread from Mark Drew. Need to get, need to get this stuff fixed."
But I mean, there's a blessing and a curse in a way, because I've had to lock down a game to a version. Because I've got some games that are like, okay, this was 4.16, 4.17, 4.18. Now it's broken, and I'm like, I'm spending more time just moving along with the engine. I think my previous machine had like 10 different versions or something like that. I'm going like, no, actually, we're going to lock down on this until we find something that's an issue, and only then will we upgrade, because otherwise we're playing with a new shiny all the time. But having said that, Niagara's here, so
that actually bit me on the backside with Bears.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I decided to stay, I think it was 4.8
Uh-huh.
or something like that. And I was like, okay, I've started development. I know from what everyone in the industry has always said in the past that once you've got a version and it's working, you lock it down and you do your development in that, and then you ship. But when we came to the end of development and it was ready to go for the PlayStation, everything was building, it was all fine, everything worked perfectly, but the SDK that it was associated with had been deprecated on Sony's side.
Ouch.
So we'd submitted it, kind of to Sony, and it had come straight back and was like, the SDK that you're using is too old, and that's the one that's associated with 4.8. And at the time, I didn't know that you can do some finagling to get it working. I'm not a programmer, so I was literally I just follow the step-by-step instructions that I find on the internet and hope it works. Yeah. So I was kind of looking at this thing and I was like, I've got the game ready. It works. I've just done all the bug testing for it, so I know that everything is okay and all the trophies are, going and all of that stuff. And they get it and they send it back. So I had to upgrade to the next version, and of course, like, ton of bugs and ton of issues and all of this stuff, mainly because it was such a massive change,
right?
Because I'd held off for so long.
Yeah, so maybe you have to just gradually be doing it.
And actually, a lot of the current wisdom is that you kind of maintain with
lockstep
with the engine, maybe hold off until the first hotfix.
Yeah, always go for the 0.1 version of anything.
Absolutely,
Anyway.
So that was a real pain point in the end, and I think the game ended up going out onto the PlayStation Store, and one of the trophies didn't work. So for the first month of the game's life, you couldn't get a platinum trophy or whatever because it just the achievement hadn't had broken in transit or whatever. It was all my fault. I didn't check it. I didn't check it well enough.
Okay, so I'm going to keep everything in lockstep now. I think I'm going to go against my own advice, but yours is much better.
See what works for you, but the general trend I think at the moment is that actually we're moving into a much more, of fluid.
And especially if you as you say, if you're using third-party stuff, you're not just releasing one binary, right? That's just for the PC. That's it. You're going on to different platforms all the time, so they change. Like if you're deploying mobile, iOS changes yearly, like major versions every year or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean they all
change.
All the SDKs are updated, kind of very very regularly, and the systems are always kind of in flux and changing. It depends on the development. There's kind of I think Sea of Thieves did a talk recently at Unreal Fest, and they mentioned that they were on a very old version of the engine. And the problem is as well, especially if you're working, this wasn't with Sea of Thieves particularly, but kind of more generally, if you're working on, kind of an old version of the engine, everyone who's working on it is seeing all the new stuff, all the new shiny stuff. And it's like, oh no, that would be really useful, but we're locked on this one and we can't do it, like Niagara and things like that.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that Niagara came along. Niagara, for those listening and not knowing what we're talking about, is the particle effects system in Unreal Engine. And it's a massive change, the same way that Matinee went over to Sequencer, right? So Cascade is a current, quote, or being deprecated, I guess. It's not deprecated, or is it just a...
Yeah, I mean, it's like it is with Matinee and Sequencer right now. Sequencer's been out for donkeys now,
and it's kind of like, do you really want to use it?
Yeah, it's like, you probably shouldn't use Matinee.
Yeah, but so it's a particle system that's actually a lot cleverer, but I want to play with a new shiny, right? I don't want to be doing. Yeah. I'm not going to be doing Cascade. I'm going to be doing Niagara. Yeah. But the problem with this is you now have a learning curve that in middle of production you're like, well, dude, just do it the way that you know how to do it.
And games dev does have a problem of being in constant production.
Yeah.
And that that could make it a bit harder. But
I think that we have to tell the industry to just get a lot more producers out there, right?
Oh God, no. I can't imagine that would help at all. More cooks for this. Yeah.
So if people wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way to do it? Twitter?
Yeah, probably Twitter.
What's your Twitter handle?
I'm at Arran Langmead. Weird spelling. Yeah. Strangely named.
Arran.
Langmead.
And also you're at Epic, so they can just email you at Epic.
They can, yeah. I'm sure they'll be able to figure out the email address for that one reasonably easily. So yeah. I go to most events as well, like kind of all of the major ones in Europe, and GDC in America as well. So yeah, if you're there and you've got a game, I'd love to see it.
You're the person to talk to.
I'm always interested to see what people are doing in the engine. So.
Well, thank you very much, Arran. And if you want to get hold of me, I'm at Mark Drew on Twitter, and you can always email your complaints, suggestions, love to show@leveldesign.fm. And thank you from us. Bye. The Level Design Podcast has been a Command Studio production. Our editor is Matthew Lever, and this episode has been produced by Bridie Rhodes.